You're listening to the Just Japan podcast. Everything you want to know about Japan.
Hey there, folks, and welcome to episode 195 of the Just Japan podcast. Everything you want to know about Japan. My name's Kevin O'Shea, and I am a Canadian who podcasts about Japan each and every week. Starting again, we've got new guests on, returning guests, wonderful people who have a great Japan perspective. People who live in Japan, work in Japan, creators in Japan. People who may not be in Japan but have some very interesting and fascinating connection with the country that we're also interested in. And this week we've got returning guest Felicity Tillack, and I'm very pleased to have Felicity returning on the podcast. She's on before, she's done travel pieces for the show, she's talked about volunteering at Koya Mountain, at a monastery there. She was on talking most recently about a documentary that she created all about third culture kids living in Japan, and that was really fascinating. Well, this time around, Felicity's got another very impressive project. She has made her first full-length film. That's right. So Felicity is based in Kyoto, Japan, and this film is based in Kyoto as well, and looks at the lives of some different people and their very interesting situations in Kyoto, Japan. So we're going to talk about that during this week's podcast. That's right, 2 weeks in a row, guys. I just spoke to her last week about this. I watched her film. It was fantastic. I was really impressed. And the fact that I know Felicity, we used to be colleagues, seeing how creative she is and the amount of skill and talent that went into this project really blew me away. I'm very impressed because it's something I wouldn't even know where to begin on something like this. So that's why we do this podcast, folks, to bring in really talented, skilled, awesome people that will impress and knock the socks off of all of us. Well, folks, before we get into the nitty-gritty of the interview portion of the Just Japan podcast, again, I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to download this podcast and listen to it. Remember, we do have a Facebook page over at facebook.com/justjapanstuff. That is the home base and pad of the podcast over at justjapanstuff.com. You can find me on Twitter at mad4maple. Come and follow me there. And of course, thank you. I want to thank you in advance for going over to iTunes and Apple Podcasts and leaving a review and a rating. That helps the podcast get noticed again. We're back after such a long hiatus. Another thing to mention, also, I do have another podcast called the Making a Better Teachers podcast, which is all about education and teaching. If you go over to makingbetterteachers.com, you can check out all the stuff there. Do a search on iTunes, on Google Play, all that stuff, Making Better Teachers podcast. So I would appreciate it if you could go over there and subscribe to that podcast as well. Now that would make me happy. All right, guys. Well, you know what? Enough of this. Let's get on with this week's episode of the Just Japan podcast, where we chat with Felicity Tillack all about her new movie, full-length movie, Impossible to Imagine. It is episode 195 of the Just Japan podcast, and we've got a returning guest. Second time on, I believe. Yep, that's right. We've got Felicity Tillack. Felicity, welcome back to the podcast.
Nice. Thank you for having me back.
Oh, very happy to have you back. And the last time you were here, and I actually retweeted the episode this afternoon, and I'm having a complete brain fart into the number of that episode, but it was maybe 175 or something.
I think so. I think you're
Might
right.
175. Yeah. And we had you on before because you had created a documentary about, third culture kids.
Yeah.
And ironically enough, since we last talked, now I can't remember, was I living in China at that time? I could have been.
I think you just
I think I just moved here.
Yeah.
And now I'm kind of coming to like the twilight of my second year here in China, and truly working in an international setting, as in one where myself and my wife, we're in a country we're both not from, and my children are not from. And we're seeing I meet a lot of third culture kids here, and actually we're in a situation where my own two children are turning into third culture kids.
Mm,
So
mm,
that's a
mm.
whole other interesting conversation. But you guys out there, there will be links in the show notes. Go to episode
Mhm.
175, and you can listen to the wonderful conversation that Felicity and I had back in the day. But you're back again, and
Mhm.
we've got a really exciting new project of yours that we're going to talk about this evening. But for
Yes.
those who may be new to the Just Japan podcast, because we haven't been around in a while, we're back, but we were gone for a long time. So for those who may not be familiar with who you are, could you just maybe tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, where you're
Mhm.
from, and what is it that you do?
All right. So I'm Australian, but I've been living in Japan since 2006. So coming on 13 years now. And because I've been here such a long time and I've worked in a lot of different contexts and most recently in international schools, I've become more and more interested in this, concept of identity, especially amongst biracial people and third culture kids. So, yeah, but I've recently made a film, but my background is very much travel videos and documentaries, and this is kind of my first really big creative project.
Okay, so now, yeah, and it is, and I was really astounded. I watched the movie today, and I have to admit, for you guys that are listening, I made a confession to Felicity just before the interview. Due to the harassment of a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, I almost finished the movie. We're there,
Mm.
we're close, but I really enjoyed what I was seeing. I saw like 85% of it,
Hmm.
and yeah. So I've got a great taste for it, and I've really enjoyed it, and I was so impressed with what you've done.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, it was really neat to see. To see that pop up on the screen when it said like a Felicity Tillack film. I was like, oh, yay! Gave a little clap here in Beijing. I was like,
It is pretty
that's
cool.
my old coworker. She had the desk beside mine years ago, when we were teachers working together.
Well, you probably noticed, the kind of issue with indie films is that one person tends to do everything. So it's like Felicity Tillack, director of photography, Felicity Tillack,
yeah,
editor, Felicity Tillack,
writer,
lighting,
editing by Felicity Tillack, yeah.
catering by Felicity Tillack, yeah, pretty much everything.
You made the sandwiches and the onigiri.
Well, I did actually, so I should have put that in, but I didn't.
Yeah.
It was starting to get a bit much.
So I'm curious, like before we jump into talking about Impossible to Imagine, your project, can you tell us a little bit about? I mean, you are a creative person. You're a creative, as they would say. I think the time that I've known, and for those of you guys out there who again are new to things, Felicity and I were coworkers several years ago in Japan. How is it that you first got into being a creative? I mean, like when I knew you, you're really into photography. You were making travel videos. How did that all begin?
With the travel videos, that began through the photography.
Okay.
I think it was kind of a natural progression. I had a real interest in, I was living in Japan, which is this wonderful country, and I had access to a car and we were traveling a lot. My husband's Japanese, so I wanted to take it to the next kind of step and not just have pictures for my blog, but also start making little travel videos. And I got a real good step up with Kansai Scene, which is an English language magazine in Osaka. And they sponsored a year worth of my travel videos. So it kind of helped spur that, me becoming a bit more polished as a creator.
Okay.
But with creative in general, I've always been really interested in storytelling, and I've been writing stories and poems since forever. And documentary, I think that's why I started moving away from just the travel stuff into more of the documentary stuff, because I'd meet people and they'd have these fascinating stories. They'd be sumo who were 23 years old and had never had a girlfriend, and I'd be like, I want to tell you a story. Or they'd be the third culture kids who'd grown up in Japan but felt really separate from it, and I'd be like, I want to tell your story too. So I think all of these things together, the passion for photography and video and the storytelling, kind of melded together and have,
Well, it really did meld together in this film. I mean, I saw all that. I saw a character, and we're going to ask you about this in a moment, but I saw a character who was dealing with being, bicultural, biracial. There was the whole language issue of English and dealing with foreigners. But you know what? Hey, before I give anything away, tell us about your movie. Tell us about Impossible to Imagine.
Okay.
Like what's for those out there who, are listening and who are thinking, what is it she has done? Yeah, in I don't want to say in a nutshell, but tell us, about the story, the
Hmm.
theme, about the movie.
Okay. All right. So it's called Impossible to Imagine, and it's the story of a traditional Japanese woman, a Kyoto woman, so kind of the most traditional of traditional Japanese people. And she runs a kimono shop in Kyoto, and it's not doing very well. It's failing. And her father would really prefer her to sell it to some of the many investors that are, starting to buy up the traditional houses in Kyoto. But instead, she decides to work with a biracial business consultant, an Australian Japanese man who was born and raised in Japan. Um, and kind of along the way, they fall in love,
Hmm.
as you do. But both of them are quite different people. She really wants the world not just to stay the same. She'd kind of like to, backtrack a bit to the kind of, golden era of before. Whereas he really needs Japan to change to kind of meet where he's at, kind of so he can fit in a bit more. So he wants
Mm.
the world to change. She wants the world to stay the same. In the end, the question is, can they change enough for each other?
Mm. Nice, nice.
Yes.
Now, okay, just I mean, I mean, it's wonderfully shot. I'm loving the story. It's great. It's I see a lot of these things jumping out, that all these things that you're talking about, that you're
Mm,
interested
mm,
in,
mm,
these the questions about identity and
mm,
about culture and this and that. And it's really
mm,
interesting
mm,
because one thing that, like, I see a lot in the news, of course,
mm,
I'm living outside of Japan now after 10 years there. I'm outside, but
mm,
my wife's Japanese, right? My kids were born in Japan, so I've always got my foot firmly planted there.
mm,
So I'm always reading the news and listening to the news about Japan, and this tourist boom, this,
mm.
especially in Kyoto, and
Yep.
it sounds pretty insane. And I've actually witnessed it just in the last few years when we've attempted to go to Kyoto
Mm,
and visit.
mm,
And there seems to be almost a bit of a backlash now within Kyoto
mm,
residents, from
mm,
what I've
mm,
heard or read, that
mm,
it's almost like it's too much.
mm.
Um, so yeah, I know I'm kind of rambling right now,
No,
but I
no,
mean, but
yeah.
these are very interesting things that, like, I was, themes that were kind of popping out to me when I was watching your
Definitely.
movie.
The tourist boom is kind a bit of a double-edged sword, I guess. There's things, cultural things, that are being, I think, kind of carried buoyed maybe by the tourist boom. You can have little experiences with tea ceremony or kimono or some more kind of, you can go to a Zen temple and experience these things. And, a lot of tourism dollars are going into that. And that's not a bad thing because some of these cultural things were starting to disappear. And you know, the fact that there are people whose livelihoods are being sustained by tourism is a good thing.
Well, I
On
suppose,
the
like,
other
in the
hand,
movie, I was just
hmm
gonna say, like, that was the whole kind of the
mm,
woman whose kimono shop was failing. That was
yeah,
like they're in, like, the kind of last gasp, like, how are we gonna make this
hmm
survive? It was by
yeah,
getting those foreign tourists to come and have that experience, right?
definitely, yeah. And the woman who owns the actually very successful tea house that we shot the film in,
Mm.
is somebody who's definitely been able to embrace the foreign, tourism boom in a very effective way. But on the other hand, the buses are packed and people bring these massive suitcases and then they try and squeeze it on the bus, and there's not enough room for the local people. One acquaintance of mine said she doesn't even take the bus anymore because it's just so full of people. People don't, they don't really realize sometimes how much space they're taking up, or how much rubbish they're producing and things like this. But it's a double-edged sword. I mean, a lot of the houses in Kyoto are being bought and restored by investors, and maybe that's a good thing because otherwise, Kyoto's 25% of the houses in Kyoto are empty. And they're
Mm.
just starting to sag and they're starting to decay, especially with the typhoons we had last year. Um, but if people are coming in and restoring them for tourism, maybe that's a good
Well, I
thing.
mean,
So I don't know. It's a balance.
yeah, it's a really interesting, like a really interesting kind of conundrum because I mean, you
Mhm.
see in the news continuously about how Japan has got a shrinking population, an aging population,
Mhm.
how there's more than 1 million homes,
Mhm.
houses throughout the country that are vacant, that are empty.
Mhm.
So I guess yeah, it is great that people are coming in there, but I mean, at the same time, I do really understand when there's like too much of something, right?
Definitely. It's
And,
being loved to death.
yeah,
And
yeah, and like you even mentioned,
mhm.
and how Kyoto people are very traditional, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's ironical enough, like my wife's from Osaka. She's Osaka
Mhm.
Jin, and I can remember many years ago when I was maybe like in my first year living in Japan or
Mhm.
second year or something, and I said to my wife, "Oh, it'd be really great to live in Kyoto. Wouldn't it? I'd love to live in Kyoto with all that tradition and history." And I remember she just kind of curled her lip and looked at me. She was like, "I don't want to live there." And I was like, "Why?" She was like, "Kyoto people are so stuck up." And I was just
Yeah.
like, okay. But I mean, at the same time, I know like obviously there's like within Japan, there's so much regionalism, right? People take so much
Oh
pride
yeah.
pride in their hometown, their home city. And
Especially between Osaka and Kyoto. I mean, there's massive rivalry there, right?
yeah, yeah. Yeah. So I think that was funny. I saw a couple of things like that popped out in the movie to me. I'm like,
Right?
like
Right?
that.
That line where she's dissing Nara.
Yeah.
I took that from, do you remember Miss Honma? We used to work with her.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
she was
yeah.
actually born in Uji,
Yoko,
and
right?
she said, "Yep, Yoko
Yeah,
Honma." And
yeah.
she said that people from Kyoto City itself would say, "That's it's basically Nara." So yeah.
Nice, nice. Okay, so nuts and bolts about this. I'm really curious. Like, and I'm
Hmm.
and it be pre interview. I talked about how my 8-year-old son watched some of this, and explained to him like the woman who made this movie, Kai. I worked with her, and he was like, "Wow, that's really amazing." I'm like, "She's a full-time teacher. Like, she did this when she wasn't working." And he was like, "What?
Hmm.
Are you crazy?" Like, I'm like, "Yeah, that's right, buddy. Like, weekends at night or whatever. Like, she
Yeah.
was making this." So, I mean, you've made quite a leap as a creative. I mean, and by the way, I just had to remember this is the third time you've been on. You were on an episode.
Oh,
Remember, you were on the episode where you had worked or you'd volunteered at
I
the
yeah,
monastery
and I think
in Koyasan.
I did a piece for you
You
on
did.
relationships
So
in
this is like
Japan
the
as
fourth
well.
time, actually. So like, yeah, you did the episode where you spent 6 months living at Koyasan,
Yeah, yeah.
preparing food in the kitchen. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. But okay, all of these links will be in the show notes, guys.
Nice.
But yeah, yeah. So, you made quite a leap from going from, of course, travel videos to a documentary to this project.
Hmm.
So I'm curious, just some of the nuts and bolts stuff. How did you? Okay, the actors. How did you meet these actors? Where did you
Okay.
find the sets, the places to film? I mean, yeah. How did you do that? Because I've never done anything like you've done. I don't know.
Okay, well, there's a few ways that you can do it. There's an actual website called Cinepoo, cinemaplanners.com, where
Okay.
you can actually write little, I'm looking for like kind of staff little, notices. And so I did use that and I got quite a few people, but unfortunately, the kind of actress I was looking for, I had a very clear idea of who I wanted, and I wanted her to be in her late 30s. And there's not that many actresses in Japan after their 30s. They don't find work or they just lose interest. So it was very difficult for me to find the woman who would play Ami.
Okay.
Um, with Hayato, who's played by a guy called William Yagi Lewis, he was somebody I actually interviewed about what it's like to be biracial in Japan.
Okay.
As I was writing the script, I was trying to get more, insight into what it's like. And so I interviewed him and I interviewed another guy, Luke. And Luke was the one who gave me the image of the bridge, like wanting to be a bridge between Japanese culture and the West.
Okay. Okay.
But then William was the one who, he grew up in Shiga, like kind of rural Shiga. He never went to international schools. He didn't speak English until he was in high school. He went to New Zealand. So he had some really interesting insights for me. And I just said to him one day, I was like, "Hey, William, would you be the main in my film?" And I'd seen him in, like, he's done photo shoots, he's been a model, and I could kind of tell from his photos that he had a naturalness about him, and he had a way of like inhabiting even within a photo, a character.
Okay.
So I felt confident in him, even though sometimes I know he didn't feel very confident in himself, being a very, a first time actor.
Okay. Okay.
With Ami, who's played by a woman called Yukiko Ito, she was actually the staff of the woman whose tea house we filmed in.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and one day I just kind of said to this woman, Atsuko Mori, I was just like, "Do you know anyone?" And she was like, "Well, actually, my staff, she was a actress in the theater for a long time. How would she be?" And she ended up being perfect. So that was
awesome. So
yeah, it
that's
was
kind
so
of
word
like
of mouth.
there's that part of the story like where Ami,
Mhm.
it's her friend who introduces her to Hayato the consultant,
Mhm. Yep.
and that friend had a tea house that was in the same kind of
Mm.
neighborhood, but she decided to move it to a more
Yep.
kind of tourist populated area. So and became in the movie very successful with her tea house.
Yep.
I'm assuming
Mhm.
that character is based on the real life person that you knew.
Yeah, she actually has a tea house in that part of Kyoto. What's it called? I forget the name now, but yeah, it's a very popular part of Kyoto, and she has one tea house there that's kind of more for walk-in tourists and it's very popular. And then she has this tea house, which is a little bit more off the beaten track, but it's more for people who are interested in a private experience, a very calm experience.
Okay.
She's very successful. Yeah, that's Kosan.
So how did you connect with a person like that? Is it just through,
Oh,
you living
yeah,
in Japan and liking tea?
luck, luck.
Okay.
Pure luck. My just a friend of a friend. I went there once. One of my friends is very good friends with her, and we did a little photo shoot for this woman's daughter. It was like one of those children's festivals in Japan. Was it Shichigo-san?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
The little girl was wearing, and it was just such a beautiful tea house. And Natsuko-san is such a lovely person. Her husband's British, and he actually has learnt how to restore Japanese armor, like samurai armor,
Oh,
which
wow.
is super cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So yeah, I was talking to him, and they're just lovely people. And then I just kind of approached her and I was like, "Look, I really need a location for my film. Is it possible?" And they were like, "Well, Sundays were open, or Sundays they're closed, so you can use it on Sundays."
Okay, okay.
So that's yeah,
Okay,
we
well,
connected
so
there.
you filmed, you got like one day a week to do some filming there.
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm curious, so like a project like this, because again, I have no idea where
Mhm.
something like this would even start or finish. From, you know, okay, I guess I'll put this in two parts. From
Mm.
the time you came up with a concept, the idea, you wrote the
Mm.
script,
Yep.
until it started to happen, like you started
Mhm.
actually filming. How long did that take? And then
Oh.
the
Yep.
actual filming editing process, how long did that
Mhm.
take?
Okay. Well, I actually started getting the idea while I was in Koyasan,
Okay.
because when I was in Koyasan, I had a coworker who, like Ami, would go to the shrines and the temples and she would pray. Whenever she had some kind of problem, she would pray. And she
Mm.
did this a lot. She did this like every day. Sometimes we'd go with her and sometimes she'd go by herself. And she was doing it because she felt like she didn't have much control, I guess, over her life. But I felt sometimes frustrated, like, well, if you just made some changes, that maybe you could make those changes by yourself. You don't need divine intervention.
Kind of like that
And
whole the whole taking action, as we say in the
yeah,
we're both like IB teachers, right? So like taking
right.
action, like making a move, doing it, taking
Making a
control.
move, like yeah, being a bit in control. And sometimes I felt that that was a bit of a metaphor for Japan, and it might be unfair, but I felt that sometimes Japan kind of wants things to be, you know, just the same, or it wants something, but it's not really, ready to take
The
that leap.
status quo, right? And then there's that
Yeah,
whole that word shogunai, right?
yeah,
That's
right.
such
So
a big thing. Where it's just kind of like, well, yeah, it's the way it is,
exactly,
eh?
it's just the way it is. We prefer, and I've talked to people recently about what they think the next era, because we've recently, we're going to have an era change in Japan
That's right.
soon.
May 1st.
What people think the next year is going to be like, and people say we think it's going to be stable. We think it's going to be very calm. So obviously, this is a high value in Japan.
Yeah.
So I had this on one hand in Koyasan, and then I was coming off the back of the Third Culture Kids, and I was editing that documentary at the time. And so the idea of like biracial Japan and non-traditional Japan was kind of melding at the same time. So I guess probably around November or December of that year, I think it was 2017 perhaps. I started thinking and writing the script. Writing the script took a long time, probably because I didn't really get into it until maybe until I had a deadline. I started filming in March last year, 2018.
Okay.
And it was because I had the deadline coming up of the day that I was going to shoot. So, and the script itself wasn't fully finished. Like, yeah, I wrote the whole thing, but then bits got added in, things got taken away. So, yeah, the script was a work in process for a good long time. The filming itself, though, the filming started late March.
Okay.
And then we did it once a month up until June or July, I think. And then we had a bit of a break. And then my producer had a look at the rough cut that I'd made, and then he said, you need one more scene.
Okay.
And I was like, oh God, I need to do one more scene. So then we filmed one more in October.
Okay.
And then I finished editing at the beginning of March this year, so it's taken a while.
So I'm curious. I'm interested in the technical side of things because I'm a podcaster, and obviously I'm not a filmmaker or anything like that. But yeah, it always, that kind of technical aspect always is very interesting to me. What kind of camera do you use? Did you use? And also, like, what were you using to edit? What software were you using? I'm curious.
I used Panasonic GH2, Panasonic GH3, and for the last ones, Panasonic GH5. And these are not cinema grade cameras at all. But, well, I mean, the GH5 is very popular amongst kind of pro-amateur filmmakers. And, to be honest, there are people making films on iPhones. So I think you should film with whatever you've got. So I know that my colorist, a guy called Aaron Eccles Smith, I hope I got that right, would have preferred the whole thing to be done in the GH5 because technically the dynamic range of the shots in the GH5 is so much greater that you can color it more beautifully. The GH2 stuff is more difficult, but I mean, they did the job. They're good cameras. I edited on the Premiere Pro Creative Cloud Suite.
Okay.
Primarily, yep.
And are you self-taught in that? I'm curious.
Yeah. I definitely cut my teeth using making the travel videos because it's the cutting and such is quite similar. The audio grading is out of my league. So I had a different person grade the audio for me, and the coloring as well is quite a science and an art. So Aaron was kind enough to do that as well.
Okay, cool. I'm just really curious. I mean, you knew back when you knew me in Japan. You know that I'm a nature geek. I'm a bug geek. I love my bugs. I love my birds. So one thing that I'm hoping to do in the future, although it won't be quite the kind of filmmaking you're doing, I'm hoping to get into kind of like some nature filmmaking stuff. So there's a YouTube channel that I follow, which is very kind of nature oriented for kids, that kind of thing. It's called Brave Wilderness, and they did a video where they talked about the gear that they use, and they use the Canon XF400 camcorder with like a shotgun mic and stuff. And that's kind of like, they do all the kind of like nature videos, wildlife videos, and I'm kind of like, next year if I save, I could probably get my hands on that little thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, so we're daring to dream. We're daring to dream. Um,
Yeah, you go for it, mate.
um, so you know, it's a big endeavor making a film like this, and
Mm.
you shot it, you filmed it, you put it all together. Um, so what's I'm curious, where are you going from here with it? What is the plan? So
Mm.
I know that I was following you on I think it was Face. Well, I mean, of course, we're Facebook friends, but
Mhm.
I saw stuff how you had a screening
Yeah.
recently.
We
Um,
had the cast and crew screening, yeah, to kind of like celebrate, like, we're done, this is it, and yeah, it was a
Tell us
fantastic
a little
night.
bit about that. How did that
Oh
go?
my God, it was so good. I was so nervous too, because I'd never shown it to that many people.
How many people were there?
Between 80 and 100 people came,
Wow, wow,
because it's like not just the actors themselves, but their family.
yeah,
Um, you know, just it was fantastic. Uh, I got flowers. We had this fantastic projector, so it looked really good, and people really connected to it. Like, so many people came up afterwards or sent me emails later just saying, people want to talk to me about it, which is exactly what I want. I want this film to be a conversation starter. I want it to be a thought-provoking film. And I think that night when we had the screening, and it just got such a good reaction from the people
nice.
who watched it, and the main kind of crew, like the two main actors and my friend Shorta, who did the audio and stuff like that, we all went out afterwards and we were just talking and talking and talking about it. And the fact that the main actors liked it as well, was a big relief,
Nice, yeah.
because I know they both stretched themselves quite a lot for this role.
Hmm.
But for where we're going next, from the screening, I've had a few different groups come and say that they would like me to screen with them. But the only problem is that I've sent it off to some film festivals, and a lot of the film festivals are quite strict about how public your film can be before you get accepted. So I've sent it to Edinburgh, I've sent it to Byron Bay, I've sent it to several Taiwanese festivals,
Okay.
I've sent it to lots in Japan, of course. And my hope is that it'll get accepted. But at the same time, if it's already kind of getting buzz in Japan, well, in Kyoto, and there's a lot of people interested in watching it, and this is where I kind of want it to be shown, then what should I do? Like, should I perhaps just go the route of like locally showing it and see what happens? I don't
Hmm.
know.
Interesting. Huh. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's what I was curious about, is like the distribution of this film and getting eyeballs on it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, of course, I mean, I've never made a film before, so therefore I've never
Mm-hmm.
sent a film into a film festival. So these different
Mm-hmm.
festivals, you've sent the film in for, or you've applied for.
Mm-hmm.
These are 2019 festivals, I assume. Are these when
Mm-hmm.
would you find out if your film was in or not in?
Mm. The earliest one is Edinburgh, and I'll find out late May.
Okay.
So, and like some of them you don't find out till September. Yeah. So the
Mm.
film festival circuit is like, generally films have a 2-year life on the circuit, I've
Oh,
heard.
okay, okay.
Uh,
So do
yeah.
you have is there like a trailer out there, kind of like a thing
There is a trailer,
that the
yeah.
folks out there listening to this episode will have a chance to have a gander at?
Yep, there's a trailer on my YouTube channel, so I can give you the link to that.
Fantastic. That will be in the
Um,
show notes, guys, and you gotta watch it. Yeah, okay.
Also,
Hmm.
Impossible to Imagine is its own Facebook page, so you can go
Oh,
there for news and updates.
awesome. I'm gonna go over and like that as soon as we're done this interview,
Oh, thank you.
and I'll put
Nice.
that link in the show notes as well, folks, over at justjapanstuff.com. I'm curious, what were some, again, it's, well, it's getting late for you. I'm an hour behind you right now, and it's actually late for me. We're both elementary school teachers, folks. Um,
Yeah, we sleep well early, yeah.
yeah, no, normally, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm gonna regret this tomorrow morning, but whatever.
Oh.
No, not really. I won't regret. No regrets at all, actually. I'm not out partying. I'm learning awesome stuff about movie making. What were some? And I want to go to like kind of a challenges
Mhm.
question. Because again,
Mhm.
like one of the things that I love about this podcast is talking to people
Mhm.
about things that I don't know anything about. and it's
Mm.
it's a learning experience for me because obviously I used to be a YouTuber, but I would just turn on my camera and I'd shoot something. I'd never edit it and I'd upload it. And luckily, I was making videos at a time on YouTube when lots of people would watch
Mm.
them. For me, anyway. But what were some of the biggest challenges for you in making the film?
Mm.
Technical,
Fine.
just logistical.
Oh, logistical was probably the largest challenge
Mm,
because we filmed once a month, so I would kind of send out this is the day I'm looking to film. Of course, I'd need the actors, but I also would hope for as many crew as possible, and those were mainly like good friends of mine who'd helped out with things before. So definitely logistical because getting people to Kyoto and the tea house is a little bit out of the way, so getting everybody there and once we were all there, it was fine. Like the day would go really smoothly, go really quickly. Um, we never had any real issues with the filming itself. Like, of course, there was sometimes with scenes where you come back to the editing and you go, oh, we might have to reshoot that. But the nature of the way we were filming, we do it once a month, and I'd have time to edit in
okay.
between.
Yeah, gotcha.
Made that process so smooth. Like I would really recommend to indie filmmakers if you want to do a feature, do it slow drip like this one. Like have locals that you don't have to pay like their transportation from far away. Because I had one mate, he has wonderful actresses, but he had to get them in from from Tokyo, all the way to Osaka. So
Oh,
when
okay,
you're
okay.
paying for hotels, you're paying for Shinkansen, you have to get everything done as quickly as possible,
Mm.
and everything's rush, rush, rush. Whereas, this way, William would like drive his car over, or we could ride bicycles. Um, it was a very relaxed day. It was always fun.
Nice.
Yeah, it was chill.
And
So I would
I
really
saw some
recommend that.
faces I recognized in the movie. I saw Gordon in there.
Mm-hmm.
I saw
Yep.
Hugh.
Yep.
I was like, wow, he's got a lot of hair compared to the last time I saw him. But yeah, so guys, I'm saying little
Yeah.
inside baseball here. Just some of our former colleagues had
Mm-hmm.
small little brief appearances in the movie, but that was pretty cool.
Mm.
It's kind of fun. I was like, kind
Yeah,
of all
like
excited when I saw it. I was like, Gordon.
yeah, I think that was like at the screening as well because a few of my coworkers are actually in it as well.
Okay, okay.
And the excitement that people got from, oh my God, I know that person. So that's why I'm worried that when it goes out into a wider audience that isn't connected in any way to any of these people, that people will be just like, yeah,
Oh no, I definitely think it's going to not be like that.
I hope
Yeah,
so.
yeah, yeah. So wow, okay. Well, I mean, this has been awesome. Again, I'm looking at the clock, guys. If you're out there listening, you're wondering, hey, I can't see the clock Kevin's looking at, but it's we're pushing 11:30 where Felicity is in Japan.
Mm,
How can people find you and the movie on social media? Obviously, they can't find the movie yet, but access to it.
no.
And again, all these links will be in the show notes.
Okay, I have my When Next Japan YouTube channel, which has not just the trailer, but it has all the other kind of documentaries and videos that I've made on it. So When Next Japan on YouTube. I have When Next Japan Twitter and Instagram and Facebook page and
Nice.
blog. So just chuck Where Next Japan into Google and all these things will pop up.
Yep.
And then
Nice.
the film itself has its own Facebook page, which is impossible to imagine.
Nice. So just go to Google, go to the Googles, type in "Where Next Japan," and there's a lot of great content on Felicity's Facebook. I should say
Thank
her
you.
on her Facebook and also like her YouTube. You go to the YouTube, you can see all those travel videos she talked about, and also that fantastic documentary about third culture kids. That's a great one,
Thank you.
which is much more kind of resonates a lot more now that
Mm,
as
mm,
my wife and I have our international
mm, mm,
education journey abroad. Now we're
mm,
both
mm,
we're in a third country, and our kids are, it's a very interesting struggle we're finding now as we work every day to maintain their Japanese and build their Japanese.
mm,
As
mm, mm.
when they lived in Japan, it was the English we were worried about. Now it's the opposite because
Oh,
both of my kids have turned into native English speakers, which is really
wow.
wild. Um,
So it's just like,
You'll
whoa.
probably find that they kind of like pendulum back and forth
I
there
think
up
that
until their adulthood. Yeah.
that's what I gather from the folks I know who
Yeah.
grew up in similar situations. But
Yep.
Felicity, thank you for stopping by
Oh,
again.
thank you.
The
No, thank
podcast.
you. It's been wonderful as always.
Yeah, I know this is great. This is really fun to talk about Japan stuff again because it's been such a long time, and I'm really happy to get this podcast up and going again. And for all of you folks out there listening, you got some more great content coming your way, and some great content over on Where Next Japan. Check out all the stuff that Felicity's doing. So yeah, have an awesome week ahead of you, Felicity. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. You too, mate.